we think of Isaac Newton, that famous scientist, he wrote even more on theology than he did on science. So theology definitely played a large role in these scientists' lives. And even today, we look at scientists like astronomer Hugh Ross or biochemist Buzz Aldrin, who were agnostics, who came to faith because of the scientific evidence they saw in astronomy or in biochemistry pointing to a designer.
Hey everyone, welcome to Clarity Over Chaos, brought to you by Women in Apologetics, where we cut through the noise of culture to help teen girls and young women build a confident Christian worldview.
Our topic today is science and the evidence for God. We want to dig deeper into how science actually points us to God and how we can be confident in exploring science as a way to strengthen our faith. With us today, we have a very special guest, one of WIA's wonderful volunteers, Katie Hulse.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Well, I would love to tell our audience a little bit more about Katie before our discussion today. So her interest in the interaction of science and Christianity grew as she was a college student at UC Santa Barbara, where she earned a bachelor's of science in zoology with a minor in history. Katie also has her master's in science and religion from Biola University. Katie works at Stand to Reason, which is an apologetics ministry that we absolutely love and love to partner with. Katie works at Stand to Reason as the office manager and one of their writers. And she also serves with our team at Women in Apologetics as a senior writer, where she enjoys helping educate, equip, and encourage women in Christian apologetics. So Katie, thank you again so much for joining us today. And I can't wait to talk to you about the intersection of science and faith. It's going to be awesome. So let's dig right into it, or dive right into it, I should say. So as we dig into the topic of science, as we discuss these kind of maybe brainier, headier topics today, let's make sure we define some of our terms so that everyone knows what we're talking about. And especially when it comes to different perspectives that you will describe about science and faith. So the first kind of fancy word, big word that comes to mind is naturalism. So Katie, can you define that for us? Tell us what it is and how we might come into contact with a naturalist or naturalistic perspective, worldview in the real world.
Sure. So broadly speaking, naturalism is the idea that only the natural or material world exists. So this definitely plays a role when it comes to science. And by science, I mean the study in the natural realm. So that we consider things like the scientific method, observation, experimentation, predictability, testability. But it's important to note the distinction between the methodology and philosophy of contemporary science. So science operates today from the framework of methodological naturalism, which asserts that only natural or physical explanations are acceptable within the realm of science. And normally, we don't normally assume that God will supernaturally intervene when we're conducting scientific investigations. So most things can be explained by natural causes. However, there are certain cases when these limits imposed on science can be just that, limiting. And this happens when the naturalistic methodology extends over to naturalistic philosophy, meaning that naturalism, the idea that nature is all there is, dictates what conclusions are permissible. Biologist Richard Lewontin famously expressed that view when he said it's not the methods and institutions of science somehow compel us to accept a material explanation of the phenomenal world, but on the contrary, that we are forced by our a priori fancy word for prior adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produce material explanations, no matter how counterintuitive, no matter how mystifying to the uninitiated. And he said that materialism is absolute, for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. So what he's saying is only conclusions in line with naturalism are acceptable, even if perhaps such conclusions may not be the best explanations of the evidence. So for instance, we see cases where such conclusions are insufficient, I think, as in cases of first causes or origins. For example, Big Bang cosmology points to a singular point in time for the beginning of the universe and everything within it, all matter, space, time, energy, which suggests a transcendent cause.
So naturalism is the idea that only natural things or physical things exist. And so what you're saying is, while of course we can use natural means to study the world around us, it can't explain everything. Like there's limits to it. And even, really impressive scientists of all perspectives can acknowledge that. Like there are some things that the natural world cannot account for. It can't bring itself into existence. Like you said, the cosmological argument, if everything began to exist, how did anything come into existence? Like if everything, we would just go back in eternity until we, I don't know, didn't hit anything. So how did any of this come about? And so unfortunately, that's a very popular worldview today, that science is the only form of truth, naturalism, materialism, kind of similar, that only the physical exists. We can't account for the supernatural, or we can't attribute anything to the supernatural. So Christians are going to kind of come up against this pretty often, whether in school or in their field as scientists or people in the sciences, things like that. So thank you for helping us understand that a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that he actually, we hear about saying the quiet part out loud, and he did. He said we can't allow God to get a foot in the door. And so it's almost like this, that to me almost sounds a little bit fearful. Like we can't even allow a little bit of supernatural anything here, that it has to be just the material world. And that's all that we have, and that's all that can be explained. So that's very interesting. And I feel like a lot of the scientists that we hear about, this is very common among them, especially, and they're the experts, right? And so, Katie, it seems like a lot of people have bought into this idea that science and God just don't get along. And that's because the scientists and God don't get along. Are there any examples of scientists in history that used science to point to God? Are there any for whom their scientific studies actually strengthened their faith?
Yeah, definitely. So when we look at the historical interaction of science and religion, we see many examples of this. It was actually more of a recent development around the turn of the 20th century or so that the idea of conflict between science and Christianity became so widespread. So, like historically speaking, the Bible informs us that nature is a reliable source of information, revealing both God and truth. We look at Psalm 19 that says the heavens declare the glory of God, the sky proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, night to night reveals knowledge, or Romans 1:19 through 20. What can be known about God is plain to them because God has shown it to them, for his invisible attributes, his eternal power, divine nature have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world and the things that have been made, so they are without excuse. So we know that God reveals himself in two ways, through the Bible or special revelation, and through the natural world, general or natural revelation. And there arose this idea in early church history that nature is like a book that reveals God. So the book of nature metaphor appeared in theological writings in the early church fathers in the first few centuries after church, like St. Augustine, for example. So scientists had that tradition, and they thought God is the author of both the Bible and nature. So these things could work together harmoniously. And scientific pursuits were seen as beneficial for increasing knowledge and for glorifying God. So the founders of modern science, like Galileo, Kepler, Robert Boyle, had this in mind throughout their scientific careers. Kepler even said, I had the intention of becoming a theologian, but now I see how God is by my endeavors also glorified in astronomy. We think of Isaac Newton, that famous scientist. He wrote even more on theology than he did on science. So theology definitely played a large role in these scientists' lives. And even today, we look at scientists like astronomer Hugh Ross or biochemist Buzz Aldrin, who were agnostics, who came to faith because of the scientific evidence they saw in astronomy or in biochemistry pointing to a designer.
Wow, yeah, that's so cool. Amazing. Yeah, I always think of John Lennox, too, because his brain is so incredible. The way he sees the world. I wish I could just have a small piece of that.
I think Christians are fearful to interact with science these days, which is it's such a shame because, like you mentioned, throughout history, most scientists were people of faith. Maybe we wouldn't have them preaching in our pulpits necessarily. Some of them, I know, like Newton had kind of some wacky theological ideas, but so many people at least had a theistic or, some kind of understanding of a creator, of divine intelligence. And they were not afraid to interact with science because they thought they didn't think that this would somehow disprove their faith. They saw it going hand in hand, which is encouraging and amazing. And I'm thankful for scientists, like you mentioned, like who use their faith and it informs their studies in science, and they do good science. Like they're good scientists. We need good Christian scientists who are scholarly and trained. And I'm so appreciative for people like that. That is not what the Lord has called me to, but I appreciate who he has called into fields like that, like such as yourself, who love science and thinking about science and things like that. So on this same topic, we want to hear more from you about your own kind of faith journey and how you have, as you've studied science and religion, how has that affected you, or how has your Christian view affected or influenced your studies in science? And have you ever felt moments of doubt or moments where you felt like science and faith were conflicting in your own mind? We just want to hear more about your story.
Yeah, so I think studying science has overall helped to increase my faith. So I think it's provided a more solid evidence and support for belief in God. Like even when thinking about how to do science in the first place, like the natural world exhibits such a rational ordering. It follows regular patterns. And I'm like, why is it? Why does the natural world exhibit such order? And why are we able to understand it? Like the world could have been different. Albert Einstein described the universe's comprehensibility as the eternal mystery of the world. But I don't think that's really a satisfactory answer, just to say like it's a mystery or we don't know why it is the way it is. I think it makes much more sense to say that there was design behind this, and then the Christian worldview recognizes this and it accounts for the fact that nature exhibits such patterns and regularity. We understand that the universe was created by a rational God and therefore exhibits the rational ordering and structure that it does. And it says that we're able to comprehend the natural world because God made human beings like us in his image. So we're rational beings made in the image of rational God. So we're able to make sense of how the universe is structured. So seeing things like that, like how the Christian framework, the Judeo-Christian framework has led to the development of science itself, and then learning more about the fine-tuning of the universe. So like cosmic fine-tuning, local fine-tuning, like what makes life on Earth possible, and the more I learn about biology, so the complexity, you would look at irreducible complexity in biological systems and biological information required to create new organisms or new body plans in organisms. So I look at all of that, and it leads me to think that there is a designer behind this. For areas of conflict, I think that has come more from the philosophy, from naturalism, than the scientific evidence.
If you've been impacted by Clarity Over Chaos or any of the resources that Women in Apologetics provides, would you consider partnering with us through a monthly gift? Your support helps us continue this vital work and reach even more individuals with the tools they need to stand firm in their faith. Personally, I am so proud to be a part of WIA because each woman on our team faithfully uses her gifts and abilities as we produce resources to equip our sisters in Christ to defend their faith. You can help support this mission of ours by getting started with a monthly gift at womeninapologetics.com/donate. Yeah, that's a good point. I think there was, if he didn't say this, I don't want to attribute it to him, but there is an apologist or a Christian scientist who said, it's not that science creates a lot of atheists, it's that atheists bring their worldview, or naturalists bring their worldview to science. Mm-hmm. And so, I think that's interesting that it's not the studying of the science using the scientific method in the lab, whatever that might look like, that might, I don't know, destroy your faith, but it's the philosophies of people who are teaching you this method or who are explaining it to you that might impact you more than what the science actually says itself. And that's not even a true thing. I just said science doesn't say anything. Like scientists say things. We scientists interpret science. And so I think, even I just fell into that. We say science says, well, science doesn't say anything. Like the physical world doesn't say things. We interpret data and models and things that we see to explain what we see. So anyway, thank you for sharing that, Katie.
Yeah, and I think that actually brings up a really important point too. Can science answer every question? Are there truths that can't be explained by science and the scientific method? So for instance, can science prove or disprove the existence of God? What do you think, Katie?
I think, of course, science can explain everything, as we were saying. So, this idea that science can explain everything is known as scientism, which is the idea that science is the only way we can know or discover truth. And the statement itself is self-refuting because it's not a conclusion of a scientific study that science is the only source of truth. It's actually a matter of philosophy. So we're talking about how science is done. That's more of a question of philosophy. So we can, of course, know things from other fields like history, philosophy, logic. I would say that science, I wouldn't say it proves or disproves God. I think that's too strong of a word. I think it can provide positive implications for theism. So it can provide evidence for the existence of God or creator. We look to the natural world and see evidence of design, so we can therefore conclude that there's a designer behind this. And I do want to make another point that this isn't an argument from ignorance, and not like a God of the gaps argument where we say we don't know how things happened by natural means, so we're going to fill in the gaps and say that God did it. We're actually making positive arguments based on what we do know, which is what causes are responsible for such effects. So it's not that, blind, not intelligent natural forces are not able to produce effects that we observe. But we also know that we have positive knowledge of a cause that is capable of producing such effects. And that cause is from a mind, it's from intelligence. And I love Stephen Meyer's work. He talks about this a lot in his works, like Return of the God Hypothesis.
No, Katie, thank you for sharing that. I think it's super interesting that we like to use the word prove, like prove to me God exists. Can we prove God exists? And like you said, I think prove is too strong of a word because we can't put God in a dish in a lab, right? We can't like hold a piece of God and be like, this is the essence of God. But I think the better word is evidence. Like, where does the evidence point to? Like, what is the best explanation for what we see in the universe, in the natural world? It's abductive reasoning. Like, let's take the evidence we have, let's take what we see and think, okay, what is the best explanation of this? Is no God a better explanation for fine tuning and the existence of the universe and the existence of the beginning of the universe, things like that? Or are things better explained by an intelligent being? Then you need further evidence to convince someone that it's the Christian God that we're talking about. But even just, I think it's better explained that the evidence is better explained by some kind of powerful divine creator. And of course, here we believe that is the Christian God, Yahweh of the Bible, which we can use further evidence to demonstrate that, I think. So thank you so much for sharing that. So speaking of fine tuning of the universe, the teleological argument, can you give us some more examples of that? How our universe is so perfectly tuned for life to exist, and that even if one tiny thing were off, all of this couldn't even be here, couldn't even happen. Can you explain more about that to us?
Yeah. So as you said, cosmic fine-tuning refers to the precise balance of physical constants and quantities that make life possible. So if any of these physical constants or quantities were to have just a slight deviation from their actual values, the universe would not be able to sustain life. So that they're just right for life to exist in the universe. So a common example is the gravitational force constant. So we look at the strength of the gravitational force, which determines how hot the nuclear furnaces and cores of stars burn. And so if it were just slightly larger, stars would be too hot and would burn up too quickly and too unevenly for life to exist. But if it were just slightly smaller, stars would be so cool that nuclear fusion would not ignite, which would result in no production of elements heavier than hydrogen and helium. So again, life wouldn't exist. And there are multitudes of examples of this. Another is the strong nuclear force, which is the force that governs the degree to which protons and neutrons stick together in the nucleus of atoms. So if two weak protons and neutrons wouldn't stick together, which means that only one element, hydrogen, would exist. But if slightly stronger, protons and neutrons would be attached to many other protons and neutrons, which means that only heavy elements would exist. So life would not be possible. So scientists have found an abundance of parameters like this that if just slightly altered by a little bit, it would make life impossible throughout the whole universe. So I think rather than simply pointing to being the result of coincidence and chance, I think it speaks highly of intention and purposeful design. If you want some recommended resources on this, I like Guillermo Gonzalez and Jay Richards' book, The Privileged Planet, or Hugh Ross's book, The Creator and the Cosmos. They go into much more detail on this.
I'm amazed every time. There are so many examples, like my kids studied the human eyeball, and just what goes into your eye working it'll blow your mind. And just all the different things, aliens changing color and all the amazing things that we have, sure, that are there's such a creative aspect to it too. You can see the creativity of God. And that's part of what I love about science, is really seeing all the different creative things and the amazing things, all of it that has to work together, like you said.
So you mentioned like the creativity and the amazing design in the biological world. And that leads me to another fascinating argument I've come across involving biomimetics and bioinspiration. So these fields apply the designs of biological systems to human technology, and bioinspiration does this by using insights gained from natural designs, and biomimetics by directly imitating biological designs. So scientists and engineers are actually looking to biological designs for the innovation and enhancement of human technology. These fields are just growing, and many of us outside of these fields are familiar with nature-inspired technologies, like the properties of shark fin improving the efficiency and speed of swimwear and marine vessels, or the shape of sunflowers influencing how we capture solar energy, or we got Velcro from looking at the spiny hook structures of plant seeds. So we're seeing designs in biology that are so elegant, they're inspiring us engineers and scientists to improve and innovate human technology, which I think is amazing. And I actually got this argument from Dr. Fazal Rana. He calls it the converse watchmaker argument, where he says if biological designs are the work of a creator, then these systems should be so well designed that they can serve as engineering models and otherwise inspire development of new technologies. So if life is the handiwork of a creator, it only makes sense that we would turn to biological systems to inspire our own handiwork.
Wow,
that's amazing.
Love
so you
that.
said it's
So interesting.
mimetics? Wait, say the word again.
Like mimicry?
Yeah, biomimetics, biomimicry, and bioinspiration.
Wow.
Man, that's amazing.
Now I'm going to have to go look that up. That's something else for me to read.
What practical advice would you give to young women, teenagers, college students who want to study science, and how can they use that to inform their faith, strengthen their faith, as someone like yourself who has studied science at the academic level? What would you share with them?
So I would say if you're studying science, you will probably encounter challenges. So be aware of the philosophical presuppositions, the naturalism that's guiding much of how science is done today. So you'll get that a lot from your professors, from scientists. So know that this will influence what conclusions are drawn. But I would also say don't be afraid to follow your own interests. Pursue what you want to study. If possible, maybe take a class on the history and philosophy of science, or read some books in those areas, because that will help as well. There's a rich history of the interaction of science and religion, and it helps you see how the Christian worldview actually helped lead to the development of science to begin with. So that was one thing that helped me in my studies, and learning about naturalism, why that determined what conclusions were drawn. And some helpful resources for me as well while I was studying science were organizations called Reasons to Believe and the Discovery Institute.
Yes, amazing groups of scientists and thinkers who do really excellent work and help build up the body of Christ with their findings and help us think through science and topics within the fields of science, which science, I mean, we're using the word science, is huge. I mean, goodness, there's so many different fields within that and topics within the realm of science. So maybe you're more of a biologist or a chemist or a physicist or an engineer. Like there's so much room to pursue your own interests within the fields of science. So we definitely encourage Christians of all ages to pursue the sciences and use that to teach people like me who will literally never do that. So we're just so thankful for you, Katie, and for the work that you do at St. Teresa and WIA, and we just appreciate you so much. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, we hope you all have enjoyed our episode today, and we will see you next time on Clarity Over Chaos. Bye, guys.
Bye.